One of the upsetting things in history, at least in the study of history, is the observation of race and the observation of Africa as an isolated continent. You see, migration happens all over the world all the time if you observe almost any continent. But if you look at some of the mainstream ideas, especially those that push back at mainstream ideas that promote the idea that Africa was more complex, what you will find is that almost all the concepts speak of an isolated Africa. Now, let me explain what I mean. If we take the Bantu theory seriously, and I take parts of it seriously, but if we take it seriously as a whole, it means that the southern parts of Africa, so starting round about Cameroon, Central African Republic, Uganda, and further south, Kenya going down, those entire regions were dominated by Khoisan people and pygmies. This, if we take it seriously. We also know that they speak of an isolated East Africa, that East Africa was, despite the fact that we have many other things to the contrary, but I'm just laying out their point of view, that East Africa was isolated from other Africans. This is what they say. This is what they say genetics says, that East Africans and West Africans didn't have contact. And not only that, Khoisan and East Africans did not have contact. And then they go further to say North Africans, so Nilotic people, and the people further south didn't have contact either. Perhaps more surprising and more upsetting is they put the Nilotics just under Egypt, and they say that the people, the Nilotic people, played very little role inside of Egypt or any part of North Africa. Now, you're probably thinking that's the most upsetting part, but we haven't even started. See, up until about 1000 BC, they claimed that all of these people were isolated from each other inside of Africa. What they then claim is that Europeans came to North Africa, and they also claim that Middle Eastern people came to North Africa. But they don't say they came once. What they say is they came in many successions. They claim actually that they came around 10,000 BC. That's when they say that's the first time they came through. And then they claim they came again around 4000 BC. And then they claim again around 2000 BC. And again around 1000 BC. And then again with the Romans and the Greeks. And then again and again and again. Now, obviously, as Africans, we must be very suspicious of this information, especially since Ethiopia is so close to the Middle East. Yet they claim that no Ethiopian really left this continent until roundabout the slave trade. Now, this makes it kind of weird and scary because, of course, there's writers who write about Kushites leaving Africa way before that. But the scary part is all the studies somehow never show any piece of Africans leaving Africa, but they show multiple groups of people from different parts of the world coming into Africa. So, for example, what they say happened is in East Africa, a group of Semitic people came through round about 2000 BC and entered East Africa. Now, call me a conspiracy theorist, but I can see the writing on the wall. Anything that is positive within Africa will be reduced in the future. I can see it slowly happening. I can see justifications being put in place already. So, for example, let's take the fact that West Africans invented iron. Somehow they're going to find some way, even though this is about to happen. And by the way, as human beings, as African human beings, We have seen this happen for hundreds of years, but somehow they will find a way that somehow this iron was brought from the Middle East or Europe or somewhere. They're going to do it at some point and find some way, even though they're claiming in almost all their studies. The only study that, by the way, is standing against this is the Green Sahara theory. They're going to find in all their studies that actually the Green Sahara was still an isolated period that separated Black Africans and North Africans. So, in other words, the North African groups are isolated. This is what they say. This is what they say that their studies show. And somehow they're going to find a way, even though it's isolated, to have the iron inside of sub-Saharan Africa come from outside, even though somehow it was isolated. My guess will probably be boats. It will probably be Phoenicians and it will probably be boats. I'm gonna guess that. As Africans, understandably, we should always keep a healthy amount of skepticism of the information that we get from the mainstream because there are definitely people who want to take away any piece of African history within, first of all, the Middle East. So the Phoenicians, the any group from the Middle East, they want to take away any real influence by Black Africans, even though there are some indicators that Black Africans played a role. They want to take away any, I mean, they really want to take away any indicators that North African Black people played a role in that area. And then, of course, ancient Egypt. And of course, at one time, they went even crazier than that, claiming that East Africans were not Africans, but Caucasians. Think what type of mentality would make someone want to even say that.
Is South Africa's indigenous non-black ethnic group, and I'll tell you why in the end of the video.
Yep, if they had it their way, Ethiopians wouldn't be black, Khoisan people wouldn't be black. The only black people really would be Nilotic people, West Africans. Those would be the only black people to ever exist in history. So that's a pretty long intro for this video that's going to claim that Khoisan people are not black. Think about again what is being said here. This is so dumb.
Is South Africa's indigenous non-black ethnic group, and
I have to pause again because it's still one of the, I mean, I have to say, dumbest lines I've ever heard. Koi said, so apparently I'm not black then. The funny part is my entire family looks like Khoisan people. A lot of South African people, even the Bantu people, look like Khoisan people. They're mixed with Khoisan people. But according to these people are multiracial.
I'll tell you why in the end of the video. And this group represents South Africa's oldest human group for over 100,000 years. And yet, they are the least represented in the politics or most of the affairs in their aboriginal countries. Which this is wrong because, of course, I can say numbers. And they are outnumbered and outbred by the Bantus.
Again, this is true but not true at the same time. Khoisan people who live in the Khoisan type of way, who consider themselves Khoisan, are underrepresented within politics and stuff like that. But they're not outbred. They're mixed with Bantu type people. They're also mixed with white people, and they're also mixed with colored populations.
In their ancestral homeland, such as South Africa, Namibia, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana, all the way to southern Kenya. This is due to factors such as the Bantu expansion, European colonization, and their nomadic lifestyle.
So, for any of you who are dreading that intro, just wait. This is why I had to put it out there because we have to put it in our heads what exactly is being said about our population and how limited it is. And of course, I want to speak about the fact that somehow everything changes as soon as records come in as a factor.
This is a group that is divided into 7 groups, which can either belong to the original Khoisan ethnic groups and the assimilated and mixed Khoisans.
Now I have to explain something right away because a lot of people are not going to understand this. So the people that he put up there, that woman is not supposed to be white. She's mixed race in South Africa, so she's supposed to be a mixed person, so a colored person. And a lot of colored people in South Africa identify as Khoisan, even though they're mixed as well. Now there are some who are just Khoisan, but they're considered colored because they live in areas where coloreds kind of look like them. And also, I want to add to this that if most Bantu people in South Africa, especially those in KZN and Eastern Cape, if they wanted to identify with Khoisan, they could easily do it because they look like them, they act like them. That's just a true fact. They are mixed with this population. They just identify more with the Bantu populations, the Bantu groups. Those are the tribes that they were assimilated in.
And before we start, let's explore the uniqueness of these people. Khoisan are built on a
So he will spend the next 3 minutes explaining what a Khoisan is. So I'm going to have to fast forward that part so that we can get to what his arguments are.
finer, shorter, more graceful scale than Europeans usually are, a natural gymnast as opposed to the natural rugby player. Mind you, their thing is mind-blowing physical endurance. You will not outrun a San Bushman. You will not outsprint him, or you will not outmarathon him. These kind have been running their prey to earth for over 600,000 years, and it shows in their physique. Their eyelid have epicanthic folds exactly like Mongoloids, which are slit eyes. Not just that, their face look also Mongoloid, and their build is also Mongoloid. But the Khoisan are not in the Mongoloid subgroup. They are in a unique group called the Capoid. Newborn Khoisan babies for a short while have a dark patch just over their tailbone, just like Mongolians. It's called the Mongolian spot. It ultimately fades, but I have not seen it on a Mongolian baby, but I've seen it on a Khoisan baby. The fact is, the only thing marking them as especially distinct from the Mongoloids is their peppercorn hair. 1 in 5 of the hairs on their scalp is tightly curled into little knots. The other hair, as you can see them, are downy hairs, colorless, short, straight, and fine.
So let's first start with a couple things here. So he mentions Asiatic facial features and body types, which are common throughout the world. You can find them in just about every continent, but he isolates them for Asia and he isolates them for the Khoisan people, which is really not fair, especially considering the fact that picking these facial features or picking these features in general is very selective. It's very selective. It's not a right thing to do if you want to choose what people are like. The reason why people call black people and they associate them with their homeland is because it's a much broader way of looking at people. So in other words, taking Khoisan and all Africans all the way to the north, those who are heavily melanated, including the Khoisan, by the way, those you get a much tighter group than looking at a certain feature within Khoisan people, which is, by the way, just random choosing. There's no talk about their noses, their lips. There's no talk about any of that, and their body types, which are very common in Africa and not common. Stuff like statopegia and stuff is common in other parts of Africa outside of the Khoisan, even though people claim that it's only the Khoisan. There's a lot of things going on that would tie them to Africa. But if you select just the eyes, then of course you're gonna be like, oh, they look Asiatic, unlike a lot of Africans, which by the way, a lot of Africans have these epicanthic eye folds. They're actually very common outside of the Khoisan people. For a lot of people, this eye fold is more striking within light skinned people rather than Africans of very dark complexion. And so they make the mistake of thinking that black Africans who are very dark don't have this epicanthic eye fold, but they do, especially Nilotic people.
African races not all have this kind of hair, but also they have acquired it from intermarrying into Khoisan bloodlines. And other peculiarities, Caucasoids and Negroid women build up fat reserve on the outside thighs. Khoisan women, on the other hand, have steatoptia. That is, their fat is built up just on their butt cheeks. And this amazed the European so-called scientific imperialists at that time and resulted into their dehumanization and
Again, there's a lot of problems going on with what he's saying right now. One, even as far away as Kenya, Stetopedia is available within Bantu peoples, within Pygmies, and within other African groups. So Stetopedia is not something that's completely unique to Khoisan people, even though it's more prevalent and more pronounced within the Khoisan people. This would be another one of these features that is typical inside Africa and not typical at all outside of Africa, which is, would bring up the question, if you're going to try and separate these people, why not first pick all the similarities and see if you can debunk them? The other thing that he said, which was very concerning, is he said, so called white imperialists. What's so cold about it? They were white and they were imperialists. It's not so cold. It tells you exactly where his point of view is coming from.
fetishization of the Khoisan women. And lastly, everyone agrees that black don't crack. But that
First of all, not everyone agrees with that, and it's more of a clever rhyme than it has to do with something based on truth. Everyone gets old and things start to look old.
is not the case to the old Khoisan people. Their aged skin are very, very wrinkly. And so that said, let's look into the Khoisan communities.
Now, while it's true that melanin and the strength of melanin will keep your skin in a much better condition for much longer, that does not mean that eventually it won't basically fold because, of course, it's made of leather and this happens to leather no matter what. Gravity and all of that plays a role. It's not just the sun or whatever. Gravity plays a role and everyone will start to look very, very old. But why are you going this far to find like some random saying to try and prove your point?
The Khoisan community is a group that is divided into 7 subgroups, which can either belong to the original Khoisan groups or the assimilated and mixed Khoisans.
Okay, so I think it's important now that I show you why he is wrong about what he is saying. So this is a picture of Nelson Mandela. He is not a Khoisan, even though, like most Bantu people located in southern Africa, he is mixed with Khoisan people, but he is not considered a Khoisan. But if we put him right next to Khoisan people, you will see that he has the same typical physical characteristics, which again, it's not odd to find people who look like this in South Africa. Let those with eyes see how desperate it is to try and make it seem like the mixed population of Khoisan are only those mixed with white people. Even the second president of South Africa, who also identifies as a Bantu person, did not differ greatly from Khoisan people in his physical appearance.
So, let's start with the original ones. Let's start with the Khoi. The word Khoi, from the word Khoi Khoi from the Khoisan. The term Khoi is derived from the Nama word for people. The Khoi are farmers, but the San are hunter-gatherers. They have a huge amount of genetic variation within themselves, but haven't mingled much with outsiders for possibly 100,000 years. So, they have some local oddities. They have peppercorn hair, unlike other Africans.
This man is living in a fantasy. Khoisan people have very typical African hair. I mean, you can easily just jot it down. Whose hair is similar to Khoisan hair? Black Africans or any other group around the world? The so-called peppercorn hair, which I don't even know if that's like a real thing, is also available, according to many writings that I've read, to pygmy people. And of course, like I said, a lot of Bantu people are mixed with Khoisan people, so that doesn't even make sense to imagine that they don't have similar hair.
Their skin has a khaki tinge, and their faces are an odd mix of African and Japanese people.
Again, if we go to Africa, which by the way, I don't know why he mentions Japanese people as if they're uniquely more Asian than everybody else, but the obviously the people in Africa have the same epicanthic fold and the same general face as some of the Khoisan people, especially people of Nilotic origin. It's difficult for some people to see it because usually these people aren't compared. But look at these faces. Would you really say that they are that far away from each other? Again, Nilotic people, they have so much other stuff going for them. They're tall, they're extremely dark skinned, but their hair is the same as that of the Khoisan, and their eyes, high cheekbones, medium nose compared to most Africans, and then their lips are grooved in the same way. It's hard to even explain. Now, I don't want to pick on anybody, but in Japan, there's actually a trend within beauty people of eye widening. So you must be careful to take this as a direct feature. But also look at the Khoisan woman and look at the one that he provides, the African. Are they really that far apart physically in the face? Outside of the dark skin, obviously that part is very different, which again, lots of there's people in West Africa who have this skin color. It's not as common. I agree. It's more common to be very dark, but this skin color is not unique to Khoisan people. And of course, Khoisan people are this light because they live in South Africa, which is very far away from the equator. And they've lived there for tens of thousands of years.
The Khoi people are primarily found in South Africa, Namibia, and Botswana, although their population have significantly declined over the years due to various historical factors including colonization, dispossession of their lands. Unlike the San Bushmen, they are known for their nomadic and pastoralistic way of life.
The Khoisan were way more expanded prior to the Bantu migration. And that's how we know that the Bantu migration did happen to some degree because there was a push of these people and their rock art starts to disappear, being replaced by Bantu rock art or West African rock art.
Traditionally herding livestock such as cattle and sheep, the Khoi people have a unique cultural practices, languages, and belief system. Some Khoi communities speak languages from the Khoisan language family, which are characterized by their use of click consonants.
Now, the most famous click languages in the world, I mean, the most famous click language in the world is Zulu, which has clicks in it, and Xhosa is probably second after that. As you can hear in the word Xhosa, it has a click built within it. And of course, there's versions like Ala and Ala. These are some of the clicks that you can find inside of the Bantu languages, the Nguni languages. So there's a clear joining of languages and a clear joining of peoples.
Historically, the Khoi had encountered with European explorers, including the Dutch, in the 17th century. These encounters led to conflicts and eventual colonization of their lands. The
Eventual colonization means that it's not so called imperialism, it's actual imperialism.
Khoi people faced significant oppression, displacement, and loss of their cultural heritage during the colonial period. But the good news is, in today's time, efforts are being made to recognize and preserve the cultural heritage of the Khoi people.
This part, of course, is very important to preserve indigenous people from anywhere. And it is a good thing that he recognizes these people as indigenous to this area, these black people as indigenous to South Africa. So for the next 10 minutes, he goes on about the Khoisan people and how they struggled in South Africa, which I think is a very important piece of this video. And you can go and watch that if you want. But we will carry on with the other part that he is talking about, because otherwise I'll just have to play the 10-minute part and just carry on. So let us move on to the part where he makes the claim that these people are not black Africans.
So, these people are in the first group of the pure Khoisan ethnic groups, and in the upcoming video I'll explain about their various mixed descendants who in South Africa are known as coloureds, who are mixed either by the Germanic Dutch and English or the Bantu people or a cocktail of all the ethnicities found in Southern Africa, such as the Cape Coloureds.
Well, I'm glad he mentioned the Bantu people as well inside of that group, but also most Bantu people in southern Africa, again, especially in the Nguni populations, are mixed. Even in Great Zimbabwe, ancient DNA found that they were mixed with Khoisan and Bantu populations. So this is very weird, but it's important that I point it out.
So that said, let's discuss about the Khoisan's blackness and why the Khoisan people are not black-skinned as other African groups, such like the West Africans, Bantus, Kushites, Pygmies, and Nilotes. Well, the
Well, you got me on the edge of my seat. Let's see what this novel idea that he's going to come up with is. I hope it's actually something good.
Some people of Africa have a different skin color compared to other African groups. The reason for this is related to the intensity of ultraviolet radiation or sunlight in their respective regions. People develop different levels of pigmentation in response to UV exposure.
Which, by the way, is not unique to Africa. South Americans tend to be way darker than people located in Canada, who some of them are so pale that, basically they look like quote unquote Japanese people in skin color.
In regions where the ultraviolet intensity is temporary, such as during high summers in the tropics, the tan is also temporary. In high altitude regions with permanent high ultraviolet intensity, like the subcontinental massif under the equator of Africa, races have evolved a permanent tan. Examples of such races include Bantoid groups and West Africans, Pygmies, Nilotes, and Kushites. But the Khoisan, however, did not have a permanent tan. Khoisan babies are born with a pale complexion and do not darken significantly unless they are exposed to high ultraviolet sunlight. Most Bushmen, a fraction of the Khoisan, live with minimal clothing under African sunlight and therefore have a temporary tan.
Yes, Khoisan people are further away from the equator, but much like Asians who are closer to the equator, like people in Thailand and places like that, that does not mean that they are completely different and they're no longer the same type of Asians that you would get in other places. Everybody would still call them Asians.
Similar to other light-skinned Africans who follow similar practices, who have similar effects, such as the ancient Egyptians, whose
Wait, so is he just out and out admitting that Egyptians are black people who who just appear to be slightly lighter than some of their neighbors? Probably not. Also, I find it funny that the people that he shows are actually extremely dark, even compared to Khoisan people. Now, obviously, if you even look at it as a tan, this is quite significantly darker than the Khoisan people, which is weird. Look at the image on the CGI image he provides in lightness compared to both the man and the woman that are provided.
skin color is reddish tan, similar to the Khoisan people. And skin color is also an adaptation to local environmental conditions and is not a reflection of intelligence, evolutionary fitness, or African identity.
Well, I think there's a lot of people who are Middle Eastern who would argue that they are not reddish in skin color. In fact, most of them are pretty pale, way paler than the Khoisan people that you're talking about. Now, they are darker skinned Middle Eastern people, but this is not based on them living in Africa. This is based on them living in the Middle East, close to the equator.
It is important to consider the body's need in different environments and provide necessary provisions. Human beings are a cultural race and have a ability to adapt to their environment to suit themselves. And also, not to forget, because some people have a faint yellow or apricot cast to their complexion, which is not similar to the flesh tone pink complexions of Europeans.
Again, although this skin color is not the most typical in Africa, other parts of Africa outside of the Khoisan, it's still present. And so to say that it looks nothing like it, whereas you can say in Europeans it looks nothing like it, but you will find people who look like this in other parts of Africa. It's rare, but it's still there.
in which this is the natural skin color of the Khoisan. So, to end this video, the Khoisan people are not black. If they have to be black, they need to have black skin.
This is getting dumber and dumber. So would he consider Indian people black in the same way that black Africans are? Because a lot of Indians have extremely dark skin. Trying your hardest to remove black people from other black people will never happen. It is true. There's a lot of melanated people around the world, from the Americas, from Melanesia, from Polynesia, from Africa. Everywhere you will find people who have dark skin. Even in Europe, they used to be dark in skin. Would you call those people black? And so the question and the point of this video is pointless.
In which, for those black supremacist Afrocentrics who think that everything African or everybody who lives in Africa or anyone who is indigenous in Africa should have a darker skin tone.
I don't know what he's talking about. Which group of Afrocentrists separate Khoisan people from their group? Clearly, no Afrocentrist, maybe some weird group that I've never heard of, thinks that Khoisan people have nothing to do with Africa. What he's desperately trying to do is to try and indigenize the North Africans, which is again strange. The North Africans know they come from the Middle East. They're indigenous to the Middle East. Even if you take their numbers of, oh, they came here 10,000 BC or whatever, that would still make them indigenous to the Middle East. And they started off in Africa like everybody else did, as a very black group of people, and then they went to the Middle East, and then later, which way later than they put, but later.
This is a stereotype created by the European imperialists. And now the funny thing is Afrocentric black supremacists are pushing this idea of blackness. Africa is diverse.
Well, first of all, let's start with the fact that the word Afrocentrist is not synonymous with black supremacist. And then, secondly, even what you say black supremacists believe is not even true. Now, obviously, I understand the whole Africa is diverse today, which is true, but just about every other continent is too, in terms of other races coming inside the lands. But that that part is just accepted. Like we all accept that people can live wherever they want to live.
There are a lot of different people. And there are a lot of different phenotypes, there are a lot of different skin colors, there are a lot of different hair textures.
Yes, they are. And the people in North Africa who occupy it today are indigenous to the Middle East.
And this diversity is what makes Africa special. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed this exploration. If you like it, make sure to subscribe, like, share.
Well, there you go. According to this genius, if you're a light skinned black person, you're not black. So remember to go and change your identity and your local whatever. Sometimes I wonder where these people get these ideas from. Anyway, like, share, subscribe, and everything else.